Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Backlot Banter. My name is Sucker Hazel. Today, I'm joined by my totally normal and not scary at all co-host, Tanner Dykstra, and today we're here to talk about Terrifier 3. I'm very glad that I got to see a Terrifier movie finally in theaters because I caught up on the other two after the second one came out, and we're here to tell you about our experience watching Terrifier 3 in theaters opening night. It's a big moment for us.
That's true.
As horror fans, Damien Leone is back. Art the Clown is back. We saw it on the big screen. Tanner, what do you think of Terrifier 3?
So Tucker, I explored the Terrifier films in the lead up to this, and I was also interested to see this one in theaters. I'm not a fan of the first one. Think the second one is quite good, and Tucker, I think this third one is somewhere in the middle for me. I think there are things that I enjoyed about this. I think that is improving. I think Damien, is it Leone or Leone?
I think it's Leone.
Leone.
Yeah.
I think Damien Leone is improving on the series as he goes along in certain ways. I mean, 2 is obviously a vast departure from that first film.
Yeah.
And I think that I'd like to see him correct in other ways.
Okay.
I think there are some, and we'll get into what I liked and what I didn't like.
Yeah.
But on the whole, I'm really sort of divided on like things I liked and things I did not so much care for in Terrifier 3.
Sure.
Well, let me know what you think.
I think that you're right in that the perfect Terrifier movie is somewhere between 2 and 3.
Sure.
And that's because each movie has its strengths and its weaknesses.
Yeah.
And I think it's really, really interesting where you can tell improving skill, improving budget, and more experience go to making this movie, but then also in ways where that ends up being kind of flaws of this one. But I think that Terrifier 3 is a really fun movie. I'm very glad I finally got to see one of these in theaters because I'm the kind of guy that watches Terrifier 1, watches Terrifier 2, and those movies are very different and have their own pros and cons, and they're all kind of similar tone, but they all kind of have their own tones in an interesting way. And I find Damien Leone's creative vision to sort of recapture and also bump up the volume on the sort of 80s slasher extravaganza to be just such a refreshing take on horror in the modern context when we are so inundated with either oversaturated franchise horror of like legacy sequels, Blumhouse stuff, or A24 horror. We kind of have a few avenues we're going down, and then there's Art the Clown, Damien Leone, Terrifier, sitting in the corner just like bashing his own knee in, but it's awesome. And so I had a great time watching this movie. I think it plays to almost all the strengths of the Terrifier series. And there are good parts and there are weaker parts, but overall I'm like, this is exactly what I want to see.
Okay.
This is what I want to see Damien Leone do, is improve on his craft, hone things, bump up the popularity of this character as the films get bigger budget, bigger marketing, bigger releases, and it's really fun to watch this come into its own.
Yeah.
As the series evolves over time.
It is a fascinating exploration of like this indie horror sort of like not even like sensation from the outset, but what really
because this isn't like The Exorcist where it was like the highest grossing movie.
It just exploded in popularity relatively with 2, and now we're sort of like climbing the ladder steadily with 3, and they've announced 4 already. So I'm excited to see where it goes. But first of all, Tucker, I want to ask, where should we start with Terrifier 3? What do you want to talk about first?
Well, I want to talk about where this movie and the series and Damien Leone is at is strongest, which is at just creating sequences and creating ridiculous sequences. And in my opinion, where some people might read, I don't know, like a brutal meanness to the character, Art the Clown, malice, I just seen as goofy fun.
Okay.
And so I watched Terrifier 3, and I'm just sitting there, and he is slicing off people's hands, and he's going, oh, and he's laughing and pointing and like showering people in blood, and I'm just sitting there with a big old grin on my face, and I'm like, this is what Damien Leone wants me to think. Is just sit there, watch, and have a big goofy grin on my face as I watch Art the Clown do these ridiculous fucking things.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, obviously that is where a lot of like the Terrifier fans get their enjoyment from, is watching the all-out gore fest that Leone and his special effects team can create here. And they are admirable sequences, technically speaking. I mean, I think that a lot of my assuasions sort of evolved past that first film with 2 and 3. I don't approach them from a standpoint of like I'm getting like joyful glee out of this.
Yeah.
I'm approaching them from like this is really effective makeup work.
Yeah.
The disgusting nature of it is really coming through.
Yeah.
He is really like pushing the envelope and like pushing horror fans to the point to the absolute limit, I think.
Yeah.
And
Which basically no one else is doing.
Pushing his budget to the absolute limit from those standpoints. I mean, that bedroom sequence in Terrifier 2, they said took months and months of like storyboarding and effects training and stuff like that to get through. And then now in the lead up to every single movie, we're going to have either Leone or David Thornton, I believe.
Yeah, David Howard Thornton?
David Howard Thornton.
Yeah.
In the lead up to 3 was like, there was a sequence here that I almost threw up during. Like,
do you know which one it was?
They didn't say. Okay. I would presume, spoilers for Terrifier 3, that it's probably the rat thing.
Oh, maybe.
I think that's gotta be it. Sure. Because, like, the Chainsaw Psycho sort of homage is a little bit more standard Terrifier fare, I think. But the rat thing is something that I was like, ooh, Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
And that's where I approach these horror sequences in Terrifier, is a Jesus fucking Christ thing.
Sure.
Is that they do feel like cruel and also like real effects driven showcases.
Sure.
So yeah, obviously they're quite strong here. I have one.
Okay.
I have one that I don't like.
Okay.
And this is not like this is not even necessarily like a slasher sequence. It is, again, spoilers for Terrifier 3. Art makes a bomb and blows it up in a mall.
Oh, yeah.
I was like...
Well, he doesn't blow it up in a mall.
Well, true.
We don't know where he was going to put that bomb.
But, like, effectively...
A bomb blows up in a mall and kills a bunch of children.
There's, like, a domestic terrorism scene in Terrifier 3 where I was like, okay, I don't know.
Like, why?
I'm not getting anything out of this as, like, an effects horror fan.
No.
It is...
There is pyrotechnics, but it's not like they're the craziest pyrotechnics.
No, and, like, I get that overall the Terrifier films are going for, like, shock value, but I'm like, yeah, but when you're doing just blowing up a bunch of kids, like, sure, there's the shock value there, but you're not, paying homage or harkening back to slasher roots or anything like that. You're not giving me anything effects-wise. You're just like, and we killed a bunch of kids. Isn't that fucked up? I was like, yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, it is,
yeah.
No, I totally agree, because I think that doesn't play into the strengths of either Art the Clown and his performance and his personality, or the effects team.
Right.
Because there's solid pyrotechnics. I could not do that, but it's not... That pyrotechnics is not their bag, and so we don't really get this. I mean, I think there is like a couple of aftermath shots of like body parts strewn about, but not even like we don't even like see like people flaming, like running around and stuff. This is also because it's not. Art the Clown didn't intend to do that, and so it's not like we even get him like sadistically setting this up and stuff. Which I think is really interesting, because the sequence of that comes after, I think, is a very fun thing, a very interesting juxtaposition against one. I think the other great strength of Terrifier 3 in particular is leaning into being a Christmas movie, and the sort of weird subversion of Art the Clown as a Santa Claus figure who is giving actual gifts to children and they're like running around and like playing Santa Claus and stuff. Which is very different tonally and definitely gives this movie its own vibe.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the budget has advanced. We're getting more extras in and stuff like that. Because something that I've always sort of that I take issue with in Terrifier 2, and it's really my only setback with that film, is that like the murderous sequences feel disconnected from the rest of the narrative. But here, he is, there's the initial discovery of Art, obviously, but then he is always sort of encircling or trying to track down Sienna, I think. Actually, I take that back. He's not really doing that.
And here's the interesting thing about Terrifier 3.
Yeah.
Terrifier 3 is a much better made movie than the last two. The cinematography is better, the color grading is better, the production design is better, I think the performances are better across the board, but it also feels like it tries to take itself slightly too seriously in its protagonist's narrative, and forgets at the end of the day to intertwine the Sienna narrative and the Art the Clown narrative. They feel largely separate, and the problem with Sienna's narrative, which I think is fine, I think let me get the actress.
Lauren Lavera, I want to say.
Just double check that. Lauren Lavera, yeah.
Okay.
I think she's actually very, very good.
When I watched Terrifier, first of all, Terrifier 1, I'm like, these performances are fucking god
really
awful.
bad.
And then I watched Terrifier 2, I was like,
Wait, she's a really good actress.
Holy shit! I'm like super compelled by our main character.
Yeah.
Even the actor for Jonathan, I'm like, this kid's doing a good job.
Yeah.
The mom in Terrifier 2 is doing a good job. I was like, oh, we got like actors here.
Yeah.
Which really
Basically didn't happen in the first one.
Elevated my thoughts on Terrifier 2. And in Terrifier 2, we're seeing these things that are super interesting. These like a prophetic sort of thing with Sienna and this sword, and her father drew Art the Clown in his notebook, and she has like visions of this clown cafe thing that to me really elevate Terrifier 2 to a point where I think it is better than this third installment. That was like we are dropping so many lines and we're implementing them so creatively. We're sort of breaking out of the standard slasher narrative. In that movie's 2 hours and 20 minutes long, which is what kind of why I'm like, I don't really care, because we're trying to seed some really interesting stuff through this film. And then in 3, it really sort of
they half pick it up.
They half pick it up. They try to answer some things and leave some mysteries open ended, but in answering them, I'm like, oh, I guess I was hoping for something a little bit more interesting than like Art. Or is Art a demon, or is Victoria's the demon?
I don't really know. Here's the interesting thing about all these movies. I watched Terrifier 1 and 2 back-to-back 2 years ago.
Yeah.
To be honest, I had forgotten much of the actual narrative elements of it, and so watching Terrifier 3 was a very interesting experiment in... I'd say they do like a 3/4 job reintroducing you to the narrative concepts introduced in 2. But also, they add flashback scenes that aren't actually from the previous movies that kind of like convinced me I had seen these scenes already, but I'm like, wait, no, they're actually not replaying. Like, this is actually new.
Oh, you mean like the stuff with Sienna's like a kid?
Yeah.
That stuff's not in. That's new.
And so I'm watching all this and I'm like, but I honestly I could not tell you the lore of Art the Clown. I believe the creative team knows it, but I don't think they do a great job of getting that across, especially given that the things set up in 2 are only partly carried over in 3, and then they try to like retroactively introduce some elements that then kind of reframe what happens in 2. But I think it just doesn't quite hit, and that again is to where I think this movie narratively is at its weakest, is connecting the Sienna narrative and the Art the Clown narrative, because Art is we don't know his goal.
Yeah.
We don't know why he can do these things. We don't know why he can enter hibernation for 5 years in a chair.
Yeah.
Like, there are these things that, as someone who is very compelled by especially horror series lore, I'm a big fan of especially Child's Play and Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street, that I think all do this really well in introducing, even if it is fantasy ridiculous elements, to Chucky or Jason or Freddy. There are the seeds of those being planted in this, but we're 3 movies in, and I could not tell you what any of this means.
And this is something that I wish we had. Leone went left. I wish we would have gone right on this thing. Is that like Art is not a compelling character.
I think he's not a compelling character because we don't know the lore behind it.
Exactly.
Like, even if it was in the way that Jason Voorhees or Freddy Krueger is,
Jason,
like, they have this history that gets fleshed out over the course of like a dozen movies, and it makes me like them as a character in the way of there is this ridiculous sci-fi horror shit going on. It's there in the mind making Art the Clown, but because I do not know it and couldn't do what I did with Freddy Krueger, where like, oh, I know his sort of like history and where he comes from, and like, even if it is demon shit, like, there is a history there. It's not present in the movies of Terrifier 3. And so I agree that lore-wise, he's not very interesting. But he's not interesting yet.
Yeah.
But I do like Art the Clown because I think, much like Freddy Krueger or Chucky, he is a personality character.
Sure. Okay, I can definitely see that. But like the thing there with me is that like Chucky and Freddy talk, and so they can
Freddy, yeah.
Yeah, and then they can joke. Art pointedly does not talk or make noise.
Yeah, no sound.
It's all physical performance, and the physical performance is good.
Yeah.
But for the amount of time that we spend with Art, I'm like, okay, so he's gonna show up, he's gonna act like a little innocent, dancing around, kind of funny thing, and then he's gonna pull out some sort of knife or gun or whatever and kill everybody there.
Yeah.
That is how every single Art the Clown scene or interaction goes.
Correct.
And like, I it's fine, and like David Henry Thornton, right? Did I get that name right?
David Howard Thornton?
Howard Thornton, sorry. Does a good physical performance. I wanna harp on that.
Yes.
But like, I get how he's gonna operate in every single scene.
Sure. Yeah.
There's not really an element of like unpredictability to it,
No.
or
interesting.
or really anything that's gonna keep it fresh. Like even the new gadget that's introduced, the liquid nitrogen thing. We are shown that initially with like a rat, and then he uses it on like the Santa in the bar or whatever. And I'm like, oh, maybe that could have been like a surprise or something. I don't know. That would, because I'm like, well, if he has someone captured, he's gonna use the liquid nitrogen thing. And I wish he would have used it more, frankly.
Yeah.
Anyway, that's sort of my treatise on like Art the Clown as a character. I think that you're absolutely right, Tucker. We could get some more lore, some backstory things to flesh him out, but I'm also not entirely sure if Leone is like interested in that, because we introduce a different character here.
Yeah.
Well, we don't introduce her. We are tagging along with Art, especially in the third act of this film, is Victoria.
Yeah.
The surviving victim of the very first Terrifier movie. She has a horribly disfigured face. She is in a tub of like blood and poop for about 5 years, and so she has decomposed. We like to believe that she is the embodiment of a demon of some sort. And like she's like wielding a piece of glass as her main weapon. She has like a new Art the Clown suit, and that's like a crown of thorns or something going on here. And I'll say it, Tucker, I don't like her.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's interesting. I think she's fine. I don't think she adds too much, but also because there's like basically no attention given to her narratively. She just is present, and it's actually interesting because it's kind of the inverse of the little girl Art in 2, where she has a much stronger personality and visual identity.
She's also not real.
No, she's not real. But like they play similar roles to like expand the amount of crazy, wacky demon characters that we can have scenes with.
Yeah.
But Victoria is not present or seemingly particularly connected to Art. Like they don't really interact at all in many sequences. Because Art's alone for a lot of it. And the scenes that there are together, like, it's not like they're working together. And, like, there is, unlike the little girl in 2, there is some sort of narrative justification here because she does talk. She does have apparently some demonic connection thing.
So, this is a post-credit scene in 2, which is where we pick up in 3, is that Victoria, after she murders the news anchor in the first Terrifier film, is put in a mental institution. Post-credit scene of 2, she gives birth to a new Art head.
Yes.
And that is where we pick up in 3.
Yeah. Which is a narrative connection.
Yeah.
But in this movie, that connection is not particularly fleshed out. I agree. I just like, I don't really know why.
Yeah, and here's my thing. I've mentioned that Art the Clown doesn't talk, and I don't want to frame that as like a bad thing. I'm not like, Art the Clown should be making jokes and talking to his victims, because she does talk to her victims when she's introduced in the final
she's
final
like a
sequence.
Deadite.
Yes, she's
like an
very
evil Deadite.
Very Deadite coded.
And to me, that's not a compliment, because one of my biggest problems with the Evil Dead movies is just the generic Deadites that just kind of like curse a lot and like say like weird shit. And it's like, I don't know, that doesn't like compel me particularly.
Sure. But like she's there, and the third act of this film, the final sequence of this film, improves so much after she is killed.
Oh, definitely, yes.
Yeah, and I'm like, I just don't like her in these sequences. Like she seems frivolous. She seems like redundant to me.
Yeah, and I think that's unfortunate, because I like the idea of like Art having someone tag along with him, and especially as it's introduced in the beginning, like they're like sort of setting up shop in this place. But also the interesting thing about the Terrifier movies not having a lore that we understand is I don't know what the rules are. I don't know why she's here. I don't know how this operates, and so I'm compelled by it at, like on a conceptual visual level. But like thinking about it retroactively, I'm like, I don't really know why.
Yeah. Here's hoping that she doesn't come back. I'll say that because I just didn't care for that her inclusion at all.
Yeah.
I would vastly prefer like the little girl art clown
Yeah.
that like some people can see and some people can't, and she doesn't really murder anybody. She doesn't talk like much like Art does. She's just an added element of like, what the fuck is that? That's creepy. I don't like that. Anywho. What else do we want to talk about? I want to talk about Lauren Lavera, the narrative, the human side of the story, and everything like that. Like I said, I was really surprised and really enjoyed her performance in 2, and then in 3, she's given this sort of like classic last girl carrying over into a sequel thing of like, everyone thinks she's crazy. Is she responsible for the murders of the previous film? She is haunted by the visions of her dead friends and everything like that. The guilt of like not being able to save her mother if she could do that at all or whatever. And the performance is good. Like
it's really good.
It's very, very good. And when we go to that final act again, and she is having her knockdown, drag out fight with Art, I'm like, this is really good. I'm really enjoying this. Like I like that they have now a rivalry. That's my favorite thing about that is that like she doesn't know who this fucking Victoria lady is really, but she fucking hates Art the Clown, and Art the Clown hates her. Yeah, and I want to see that. I want to see that drawn out more.
And it's cool to see that surface in this movie because I guess I retroactively wrote in my mind that they kind of had that dynamic in the second one, but that's not true because she doesn't know anything about Art. And she's never encountered this before. She's never been through this kind of situation. And so it actually is a pretty significant character jump to see her in 3 dealing with mental health issues and dealing with the trauma of all of this. And I think that her narrative is solid. I think that writing-wise, performance-wise especially, she does a phenomenal job. Yeah. She's one of the like most compelling surviving girl characters I've seen.
She's got great chemistry with everyone on screen. You know, they introduced her little cousin Gabby in this one, and you know, Jonathan, her brother, pops up, you know, quite a couple of times, and she still has like great chemistry with everyone. I'm like, she's a really good like horror lead, a really good scream queen lead.
Yeah, but I think that the problem with the human narrative here is that it basically literally does not go anywhere. She gets picked up from this hospital. She ends up at her family's place, and then that's kind of it. Like, she goes shopping once, and she talks to her brother once, but it feels like a first act. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop in terms of her agency or another narrative thread.
There's a major editing issue here. Yeah. Because Tucker, what literally happens right before everyone's tied up in the chair by around the Christmas tree kind of thing? The final sequence
Art
here.
Art kills the 2 college kids.
Yes.
Yeah.
He kills the 2 college kids.
And technically kills the uncle as well off screen.
Yes, and that's my thing is that like we see the uncle waiting in the truck. She gets home, or Sienna gets home. She puts the present down. She's walking around the house. She's a little suspicious. She gets knocked out. Boom! Everyone's tied up in the chairs and everything. Yeah. There is a chunk of this film missing. Definitely. And it feels glaringly obvious.
Also, especially because of Jonathan.
Jonathan is just dead.
Yeah, we never see that.
No. Her uncle is just dead, pinned up on the wall, whatever. Yeah. The mother is tied to the chair across from Sienna.
And then Gabby
the Art and Victoria are just in the house.
Yeah. It's really, really bizarre. And again, it leads into a solid sequence and a solid ending, but the progression of the narrative is very, very choppy because we'll cut from the very slow progressing human narrative to Art off somewhere in the town doing something. Yeah. And then we'll cut back and Sienna hasn't really done much else. She's just kind of plodding our way through. And here's again the pros and the cons of this movie versus the second one. The narrative here is more focused. We have less side characters. She doesn't have a bunch of like friends and her brother to deal with.
There are no friends. There are no like dream sequences like there are in the second film, which again I enjoyed. I like those moments as a sort of offshoot of the main narrative.
Yeah, but in 3 it's very focused, but it doesn't go anywhere. And so for me, I can feel in the writing and in the runtime, I can feel the criticisms of 2 being fixed. I'm like, okay, we're going to write a more compelling narrative for Sienna. She's going to have a more unique personality because she's dealing with these things, and we're going to focus in on her. We're going to cut the fat from the other places. And also, it's not going to be 2 hours and 20 minutes. It's a very reasonable runtime.
It's like
movie.
2 hours.
Yeah, and it feels good. And again, I think that the cinematography is better. I think the production design is better. Like, it looks like a higher quality film.
Yeah.
But then there are these areas where where it doesn't do what it didn't lean into the wackiness of 2 with those dream sequences. And I think maybe even more over the top Art the Clown sequences in 2 versus 3.
Yeah.
Or at least comparable.
Yeah, I mean, like the bedroom in 2, and then like the acid in 2 and everything, and the final confrontation there is Sienna in like a battle angel outfit, and Art is using like a weird chain whip thing that like then she turns around and uses on him. Like, that's all compelling stuff. And again, I think the ending of 3, their battle in 3 is a little bit more standard slasher thing, where like they're both running around, they're both reaching for the knife, they're punching each other, slashing each other, that kind of thing. Yeah, I don't know. I for me, it was just a super strange jump into that like final 15-20 minutes. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and it almost feels like
we're here now.
It almost feels like we're waiting for the Leone cut.
Yeah.
Which doesn't make any sense because he independently financed this film and distributed it. But, like, I would not be surprised if we get an unrated Terrifier 3 that
Unrated? That's so silly. That's so silly to me.
Not the obviously it's what actually be funny if they called it that, to be completely honest.
Yeah.
But that just like adds that sequence back in and makes the movie 2 hours 15, 2 hours 20 minutes because that's what the second movie was, and I basically know there are 10 minutes on the cutting room floor.
Exactly. It's so glaringly obvious, which is my thing. And that runtime thing, and also some of the murders that happen here, feel so much to me that it feels so much like we are responding to criticisms of the second film.
Yeah.
And I'm not like huge on creators doing that.
Well, to me, it feels more like Damien Leone maybe learning from his mistakes a little bit.
Okay.
Like, I think it is responding to criticism, but I think it's like, no, actually, yeah, like, that's pretty reasonable.
I don't think, I mean, it's just a subjective thing. Like, I don't think the 2 hours, 20 minutes is like a bad thing.
No.
I don't think it was a mistake on his part to make his movie that long because it felt like it needed to be that long with all the story that was in there. Also with the psycho slasher chainsaw murder, it's 2 college kids, it's this college couple, a boy and a girl. Like, the girl murder happens relatively quickly and like without much pomp and circumstance, I guess you could say. And the guy gets a chainsaw shoved up his ass.
Yes.
And you get a close-up of like his body being sawed in half, his testicles, his dick is out, and everything like that. They're all blood. It's all a bloody mush. To me, that's another thing of like, people have had criticisms that have been levied at the Terrifier films include such things as it feels like these movies and Damien Leone are like hating or punishing women.
Yeah.
And so in 3, I think he is
3 is
like
completely inverted.
Yeah. 3,
like, he almost only kills guys. To be honest, there's 3 guys in the bar. There are the 2 guys that come to the house. Obviously the college guy.
The college guy. There's the
uncle.
There's the college girl. There is the mom.
Yeah.
But
it's much more balanced here.
Yeah.
And especially in terms of like drawn out sequences, it is mostly men.
Yes. and 2, there's a little bit of a response in it too. I mean, Art literally like rips a dude's dick off while he's pissing or whatever. There was a response to that criticism from the first movie and a further response in this one. So I don't know. I don't know if I necessarily think that's like bad that he's doing that or good that he's doing that. I like to see, spread the love a little bit. That's what I'm all about here. I just think it's interesting that he is so readily, or the creative team behind this is so readily like responding to criticisms as the series goes on. So that's why I feel like I want to levy some criticisms here a little bit. That's like, don't be afraid to make your movie longer, Damien. Like, honestly, it make it feel cohesive above all else. Yeah. And stick to your guns on like the slasher stuff. Don't be doing. I think it's funny in the first movie when Art pulls out a gun.
Sure.
It's a really, really good gag that he is like down. He's like, all right, is he gonna rush her? Is he gonna have a knife or whatever? He just pulls out a gun out of his boot and shoots her. It's a really funny gag. I don't like that he's shooting people in multiple films.
Sure.
I want to see our slasher effects going sort of cranking up the intensity here.
Sure.
Yeah. Any final points that you want to talk about, Tucker?
Well, I want to talk about the future of the series,
go ahead.
but What I think is really cool about watching all of these movies, and again, to me, feeling the growth of the creative team, and also, to your point, the responding to criticisms and being willing to zag, and like, maybe you don't do it entirely successfully because you've never done this part before, but responding to criticisms. But what it seems to me is that we are gearing towards a full fruition, I hope, response to the criticisms, Terrifier 4, or continuing forward, that answers everything that we're talking about here. I think my biggest problem with 3 is that the narratives don't interstitch enough, and that there's not enough momentum in Sienna's story.
Yeah.
But we've killed everyone she loves. We've apparently sent people to hell.
Her little cousin is in hell.
Yes.
And so we're presumably going to do Terrifier Goes to Hell.
Well, Sienna goes to hell.
Sienna
and
goes
to try to save her cousin. And oh god, I can't wait for that. Because what that means is we won't get as much, she's just kind of sitting in her room, like, worrying about her mental health. I know that sounds like a stupid thing, but like, this movie, I think, leans a little bit too
people, these characters worrying about their mental health. Why don't you just get over it?
Well, what I want to see is less of this more serious human narrative that I think is solid, but not obviously, or to me didn't feel substantial enough to warrant being most of the runtime of this film, it feels like.
I think for me it's fine because I find it compelling. I find the actors compelling. It is supplemented by horrible, awful murders, gruesome murders. Because honestly speaking, it is like upper end. The narrative, not the performances or anything. I think the actors do a good job. The narrative is like upper end Hallmark stuff.
Sure. No,
It's like top shelf Hallmark kind of stuff that we got going here. But it's like if you just cut out about 2/3 of a Hallmark movie and shoved in Terrifier, which is exactly what it is.
Yeah. And so I think that from a narrative balance perspective, I think we've cut away, like literally killed and all that for the side characters and we have apparently the narrative thrust of her being in a demonic place that will heal my criticism of this film.
Sure.
And we also, I think, have set up through 2 and 3 enough lore things, and also now the fact that we are dealing with demon stuff, where I think the lore parts will be answered in 4.
I'm excited to see where it the lore goes in 4.
Yeah.
Because the answers, the half answers in 3 didn't compel me at all. I was hoping, like I mentioned, for something a little bit more compelling than it's demons.
Yeah.
And obviously there are still questions as to like, there's one moment of super fucking cool imagery where she has this dream sequence of like the sword being forged by like a chain demon who is being held by the Virgin Mary. I'm like, that's fucking raw as hell right there. And it's the only moment of that, and I think there's more of that in 2. So hopefully, fingers crossed, more of that in 4. I think.
Yeah, or at least even if it's not a dream sequence, it's like
the actual thing, the actual shit.
But I do think I think it's a very good movie. I had a lot of fun with it. I have criticism about the narrative, but really at the end of the day, I was enjoying the Sienna narrative because the actress is doing a really great job.
Yeah.
Like genuinely consistently surprised me. I actually think she's better in this one than she was in 2.
Yeah, I think so.
And because I think there's more for the character to work with here, personality wise. And then the art stuff is just as good as it always is.
Yeah.
David Howard Thornton, I think, is one of the best horror performances of all time. And I think Art the Clown has a very unique personality and like a unique approach to things. The Christmas spin we didn't talk a lot about is really funny in this movie. It's used consistently. Like, this isn't like, oh, the opening sequence is Christmas. No, this is a fucking Christmas movie. Yeah. And everyone is going to skate rinks and buying presents and there's Santa Claus imagery and spins on Christmas music. Like, totally unique.
There is a original Terrifier Christmas song that plays in the film and over the credits. Yes. It would have been so easy to just put it over the credits. It's in the film too. I'm like, that's great. I like that. I like that a lot.
Yeah.
I think through the course of this review, I sort of said a lot of things that I really liked and a lot of things that I really didn't like, which is why I really come down on 3. I think it's a little bit of a step in some directions I'm not crazy about for this series, but we're carrying over quite a few things that I really enjoyed from 2.
Yeah.
So, from that standpoint, Tucker, I'm going to give this a 5.98.
5.98?
Yes.
5.8 out of 10. Okay, I'll go higher.
Yeah.
Because I was just happy watching this movie. And interestingly enough, this is really nothing to say about the movie. I was expecting our pretty full theater. I was expecting crazier reactions from people.
Yeah.
I basically didn't hear anything.
Nice and quiet.
Everyone's always like, oh, when I saw Terrifier 2, people were shitting their pants and screaming stuff. I'm like, I don't think I heard a single scream.
Well, I think they play up. They obviously play that stuff up, and then if there is a story, they're like, "It's guys, this is happening everywhere." Yeah. But there was 11 walkouts or whatever, and I don't know. They were probably pumping the numbers. They have no reason to tell the truth about that. It's marketing for the movie. Yeah.
But I'm gonna give this movie a 7.3 out of 10. I had a very good time in it, and Damien Leone, he's the one to watch. He's Max, really.
He's the one to watch, finally. Okay, we finally found the one to watch. Thanks, everybody.